Hey everyone, happy Thursday. Hope everybody is having a great day. Um, I'll kind of get into it. I've been watching all of the talking heads regarding the Iran deal or the um, memorandum of understanding. Um, and I would say the general takes from most of them, I literally just got done watching Megan Kelly's breakdown of what they got right and what they got wrong, and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, if everyone is looking at it, if all these talking heads are looking at it from the perspective of just the singular focus on the strikes in Iran and um, getting uranium out and all this other, like, I think they're missing the forest from the trees. And you can check back in my other videos where I've talked about Iran, where I've specifically said that this war is not about, it's not really about um, Lebanon and whatever Israel's interests are. It's not about uranium. The uranium is just a pretext to go in. The real issue and the only issue in the Middle East has always led back to one thing, and that is oil. The control of crude oil is all we care about. And in this case, if you look at the combined moves in Venezuela, then Iran, and then you pair that with the new increased focus from Ukraine on energy infrastructure in Russia, you can kind of see this kind of building out. And by the way, those strikes in Ukraine are being directed and being informed by US intelligence assets. There is zero doubt about it. Having a family member in the State Department, I won't say much more than that, but like, not that that person has told me anything, but I know where that person goes. And I will just say it's not a surprise that Ukraine has ramped up strikes on energy infrastructure in Russia. And by the way, I do like the fact that if the US strikes Iranian oil infrastructure, it's a war crime. But if Ukraine does it to Russia, it's absolutely fine. At any rate, I look at all of the way that people are viewing this, and it's through this singular focus, right? I think there are some people out there who get it. I was watching Tim Pool's breakdown earlier today. He clearly gets it, um, and there are only a handful of other ones that get it. But generally speaking, you have like the neocons that like want to just send boots on the ground, and it's about taking over Iran versus at any rate. And then you have the other side, which is like, oh, it's just about like we lost this, the U.S. lost, and we're giving them everything they want. Like, no, but what we are doing, if you look at Venezuela, we're redirecting that oil to the US. It is on at market prices, by the way. It may be at a slight discount, but it's being sold on the market to the US. So we locked that up before we moved into Iran. And then Iran, the thing that is going to be interesting to see if this comes to fruition is the biggest thing is that, one, we now know that Iran's sanctions on oil are going to be lifted and their ability to export oil is going to be allowed. But where is it going to be allowed? Most likely to Europe. And so it'll supply Europe. It'll take the supply that was going from Iran to China, now going to Europe. That would be my guess. It's going to be the Europe and the U.S. That is going to be my guess, and it's going to be sold at market rate. Then you look at the increased infrastructure, right? So like 100% of Iran's oil imports, or close to like 99% of their oil exports, were going to China. That represented a decent amount. And by the way, I've written this down so that when I get technical, I've got to make sure I've got all my ducks in a row. But I'll kind of get into it. Today, we're diving into some serious geopolitics and energy strategy. If you've been following the chaos in Venezuela, Iran, and Russia's oil infrastructure, you might be wondering, how is this all hitting China? Because China is the world's biggest oil importer, and a lot of its cheap crude just got more expensive. I can break it down for you. Here's the situation in a nutshell. For years, China has been snapping up heavily discounted oil from sanctioned or isolated producers such as Iran, Russia, and Venezuela. These barrels came at big discounts, sometimes in the range of 20 to 40%, if not more. I was last night in Tim Pool's IRL. He had a guy on there that apparently worked um, in some department that was talking about uh, essentially, I think it was Venezuela was selling oil to China for $5 a barrel because it's sanctioned. They can't sell it on the market. So they were selling it at a significant discount, but on average, around 20 to 40% below market prices because few other countries would touch them. This was a huge win for Chinese refineries, especially the smaller ones operating on the margins. But now the multiple pressures are closing that window. First, Venezuela. It was only about 1% or less of China's total crude imports, but it was perfect heavy crude sold at massive discounts. Again, mentioned at $5 a barrel, which is significant. After the U.S. sanctions or U.S. actions in the region, including intervention and redirecting flows, that cheap supply has now been severely disrupted. China lost a reliable bargain source and has to replace it with more expensive alternatives. Not catastrophic by any stroke of the imagination on volume, but it adds to the cost and pressure. Then there's Iran. This one's huge. Nearly all of Iran's crude exports were going to China, representing roughly 13-20% plus of China's imports, depending on the period. U.S. maximum pressure sanctions plus the 2026 conflict disruptions have cut off or made it much riskier. A major flow of discounted oil. China's smaller refineries loved these barrels. Now they're scrambling. Uh, Russia and China, or Russia is China's other discounted supplier. Sanctions already make seaborne shipments more expensive and risky due to shadow fleets issues and evasion costs. On top of that, Ukraine's targeted strikes on Russian refineries, storage, ports, and infrastructure are reducing overall export capacity and creating logistics headaches. Even the ESPO, which is the Eastern Siberian Pacific Ocean Pipeline, the key land route to China, could feel indirect pressure if upstream refineries and facilities feeding the system get hit harder. Result less reliable volumes and higher effective costs on China. So putting it all together, China's losing access to huge volumes of discounted crude from Iran, Russia, and Venezuela. It's being forced to buy more oil at market prices from traditional suppliers like Saudi Arabia and others. That means higher import bills, squeeze refinery margins, and rising fuel costs domestically for China. For Russia, this is painful too. Oil revenues are critical for funding the war in Ukraine, and these disruptions hit export earnings hard. Meanwhile, China faces real energy stability risks and higher economic costs, even with its stockpiles and diversification efforts. The convergence of US policy and Ukrainian actions is quietly reshaping global energy flows. It's not causing an immediate crisis for China, but it's raising costs and accelerating their push towards renewables and self-sufficient energy. For Russia, it's another squeeze on the war chest. Again, we can sit here and look at just Iran and the actions of the US and Iran in a vacuum, but they do not exist in a vacuum. There's been too many things that have kind of lined up to specifically targeting Russia and China, slowing Russia's growth, which is imperative to the US, staving off Russia's acceleration into being the world power. And by the way, if China becomes the number one world power, probably going to war. It's just that's just the way that it works. The only way that you can remove an incumbent, or the only way that that incumbent is going to allow someone to overtake them, is by force. Just my opinion, looking at history. But at any rate, China is being dramatically affected. And I'm interested to see if Ukraine's strikes on oil refineries go further, much further in to Russia. They're going pretty far in right now, but how much further will they go in? Will they start to strike at the heart of the pipeline, not the pipeline itself, but the supporting infrastructure of that pipeline feeding into China? If that happens, that makes China's ability to get oil off market near impossible. And they've got to buy it off. They've got to buy it off of the market, as in at market prices, not through shadow tankers or shadow fleets that are out there, but they've got to leverage the traditional energy infrastructure, which means that the cheap products that are being made in China a year from now are not going to be that cheap. The only way that they'll maintain that low cost is if China itself supplements the industry via just providing them money so they can continue to lose money. The businesses can lose money to try to keep prices low, to then still attack the US market to essentially push off US manufacturing of those same goods. It's going to be very interesting. Again, if you're just sitting here looking at Iran, again, in a vacuum, sure, it's great. I mentioned it in another video that the outcome would be very similar to the JCPOA, with the exception that there would be no more heavy enrichment, or that nuclear program was just going to be done. Like that is what you want to get off the table in the broader scheme of things in regard to Iran. But really, you want to control that oil flow. You want to stop them from putting black market oil out there, which is going to China and keeping prices low in China. You want to have that oil flowing into Europe, driving down energy costs there, but adding more oil to just the generally traded market, which again reduces overall prices in crude oil, which then back home, you see where prices were prior to the war, which were sitting around $50 to $60 a barrel. When you add in extra volume, right, that's extra production, and the demand stays relatively the same, prices go down. So it's possible that prices will go back to where they were faster, and they may actually go lower because you have this excess oil supply on the market being bought. But China's prices go up, Russia gets screwed through other actions, and we control the flow of energy. But hey, I might be completely wrong. Tell me that, hey, you're absolutely wrong, and this is why you're wrong. It's always been about Iran and singularly focused on Iran, and it's not been about these other issues outside of Iran. It's only been about Iran. Tell me why I'm wrong. Go ahead. I'm open to countervailing ideas and theories and philosophies. Let me know in the comment section below. But as always, keep believing that the best is still ahead for America. Peace out.